Welcome back to week 4. This week we are focusing on how early American social dance circulated through racial power structures and what role did minstrelsy play in turning Black movement into commercial entertainment. By the end of this unit, you should be able to examine early American social dances within historical and racial power structures, analyze minstrelsy as a site of appropriation, caricature, and commodification, evaluate how early commercialization shaped racialized representation of movement. As these weeks are building upon one another, we must remember that dance circulates within systems: race, class, capitalism, media, and access. We must remember that popularity does not equal equity, nor does visibility equal ownership or credit to the creator. From the very beginning of American popular dance, Black movement was widely consumed, but not equally valued, protected, or credited. Early American social dance took place in plantations, ballrooms, taverns, and urban theaters by enslaved, free Black, Indigenous, and European communities. As we continue into this unit, we must reflect to think about how the asymmetrical power relations shaped who could dance, where, and for whom. Prior to minstrelsy, enslaved Africans maintained dances and their dance practices through the ring shout, con response, polyrhythm, and improvisation as collective knowledge. White audiences primarily interacted through Black dance as spectators, not participants. As always, I want to make sure that we are on the same page and provide some working definitions. So the ring shout is a communal African diasporic movement practice in which participants move in a counterclockwise circle using rhythmic steps, slapping, and vocalization to sustain spiritual expression, collective memory, and resistance. Call and response, this should be a reminder, is a participatory communication structure where an individual initiates a rhythmic or verbal phrase and a group responds, reinforcing collective agency, listening, and shared authorship. Polyrhythm, the simultaneous layering of multiple rhythmic patterns within the body or ensemble, creating complexity, texture, and dynamic interactions rather than a single dominant beat. And improvisation as collective knowledge, a practice of spontaneous decision-making grounded in shared cultural principles, history, and community awareness, where individual expression emerges through collective understanding rather than isolated invention. I want to emphasize that Black dance existed with meaning and function long before it was profited to white audiences. Minstrelsy functioned as a systematic tool that allowed white performers and industries to extract, reshape, and profit from Black culture expression while excluding Black people themselves. This was done without permission or equitable credit. So what is minstrelsy? Minstrelsy is a 19th century theatrical form where white performers used blackface, parodied Black speech, music, and movement in which white performers profited from racial caricature. Minstrelsy removed Black bodies from Black movement, repackaged dance as a spectacle, and converted cultural practice into a commodity. Caricature replaced context and humor marked harm. Minstrelsy was not admiration, it was extraction. Early commercialization of minstrelsy required simplification of movement, stereotyping, and creating repeatability. Minstrelsy was one of the earliest entertainment forms to codify racial stereotypes through movement, gestures, and musicality, using this embodied appropriation as a tool of control. As we move forward, I want to share some additional working definitions to help provide more context. Cultural extraction is the process by which cultural knowledge, practices, symbols, or labor are appropriated from marginalized or subordinate groups and repurposed for economic, political, or symbolic gain without equitable recognition, compensation, or benefit to the source communities. Now, this shouldn't be confused with culture exchange is a reciprocal process through which cultural practices, knowledge, and expression forms circulate between groups through sustained contact characterized by mutual influence, contextual understanding, and relatively balanced relationship of power and recognition. Now we have unequal circulation of credit, which is a structural condition in which recognition, authorship, prestige, or materials rewards disproportionately occur to the dominant actor or institution, while the intellectual, creative, or effective labor of marginalized contributors is obscured, undervalued, or erased. Now we also have racialized embodiment, which is the process through which racial meanings are inscribed onto bodies, shaping how individuals are perceived, governed, and experience the world through socially produced hierarchies of race that materialize in lived bodily experiences. Now, these systems persist not because they remain unchanged, but because they adapt to new social, economic, and technological conditions. Practices of cultural extraction, unequal circulation of credit, and racialized embodiment are repeatedly reconfigured, rather dismantled, allowing them to appear naturalized within emerging industries. Early forms of cultural appropriation and racialized labor in performance and media established organizational logic regarding ownership, authorship, visibility, and profit. Then, latter entertainment industries inherited and refined. As a result, contemporary cultural economies continue to reproduce this unbalance of power through updated institutional frameworks, legal regimens, and aesthetic norms that obscure their historical origins while sustaining their underlying inequities. I want to dive in deeper to cultural exchange versus cultural extraction with some key examples. So the Juba dance, also known as the padding juba, emerged among enslaved Africans in the United States percussive dance that used the body as an instrument, stomping, clapping, thigh slapping, and chest patting, to create complex rhythms. It developed in response to restriction placed on drums by enslavers, demonstrating how African rhythm traditions were adapted under conditions of control and surveillance. The juba foregrounded improvisation, polyrhythm, call and response, and groundedness, all key elements of African diasporic dance aesthetics. Importantly, juba later became appropriated by white performers in minstrel shows, while black practitioners were denied authorship and economic benefit, illustrating early patterns of cultural extraction and unequal circulation of credit. Next, we have the ring shout. This is a sacred African American communal practice combining movement, song, rhythm, and spirituality. Participants move in a counterclockwise in a circle while shuffling steps, bent knees, and grounded posture, accompanied by call and response singing and body percussion. Though not a dance in European terms, the ring shout preserved African cosmologies, collective embodiment, and rhythmic sensibilities under slavery. Ring shout practiced strongly influenced later black social and performance dances, particularly in their emphasis on communal participation, rhythmic complexity, and improvisation. These influences enter broader American dance culture indirectly, often stripping of their spiritual and communal meaning as movement elements were absorbed into secular entertainment forms. Next, we have European social dances borrowing Black movement vocabularies. As Black movement practices gained popularity, European American social dances increasingly borrowed from Black movement vocabularies, including syncopated rhythms, improvisation, bent knee posture, isolations, and expressive individuality. Dance such as the cakewalk originated in enslaved communities, often as an imitation of white ballroom etiquette, but were later adopted by white dancers and reframed as fashionable novelty dances. In this process, Black movement was detached from its social context and recoded through white respectability or caricature, making it commercially acceptable while reinforcing racial hierarchies. This borrowing set a precedent for how Black dance innovation would repeatedly be mined, sanitized, and commodified within American social and theatrical dance traditions. Together, these examples show how African diasporic dance forms shaped American movement culture, while simultaneously being subjected to appropriation, distortion, and erasure, laying the groundwork for later entertainment industries built on racialized embodiment. So let's talk about commodification of dance. So let's start with some working definitions. Commodification of dance refers to the process by which movement practices are transformed from socially embedded, communal, or ritual expressions into marketable projects that can be sold, owned, and circulated and profited from. In this shift, dance becomes valued less for cultural meaning or communal function and more for its exchange value within the economic system. Historically, commodification involves separating movement from its original context, including cultural origins, social conditions, and embodied knowledge, and repackaging it for consumption by audiences, institutions, or industries. This process often requires standardization, simplification, and repeatability so that dances can be taught, performed, and reproduced effectively. In early American entertainment, dance commodification was deeply entangled with race and power. Black social and vernacular dances were frequently mined for their perceived novelty, vitality, and spectacle, while Black dancers themselves were excluded from ownership, authorship, and profit. Movement vocabularies were extracted, renamed, and reframed to suit white audiences, reinforcing circulation of credit and racialized embodiment. Commodification also reshapes how bodies were seen and disciplined. Certain movement qualities, exaggerations, humor, virtuosity were emphasized to align with audience expectations, while others were suppressed or caricatured. Over time, this produced racialized movement stereotypes that became legible, recognizable, and profited within entertainment markets. Crucially, commodification does not eliminate dancers' cultural meaning, but it reorders them privilege, spectacle, profitability, and ownership over lineage, community, and lived experience. These early systems established a template for later dance economies in vaudeville, Broadway, film, television, and contemporary commercial dance industries. So in this context, early commodification of dance could be considered making dance into a marketable product. This can include ticket sales, touring circuits, and mass audiences. Dance styles becoming repeatable, teachable, and sellable. Separation of movement from cultural context. Institutionalization of racial hierarchy and performance labor. These concepts reveal how historical systems of power endure evolving embedded inequality into very structures of modern cultural and entertainment industries. So, that is it for this module. Be sure to complete the assignments materials for this week and submit your discussion posts. I'll see you next week.